The Melbourne Cricket Ground, MCG, also known locally as The G, is an Australian sports stadium located in Yarra Park, Melbourne, Victoria. Founded and managed by the Melbourne Cricket Club, it is the largest stadium in the Southern Hemisphere, the 11th largest globally, and the second largest cricket ground by capacity. The MCG is within walking distance of the city centre and is served by Richmond and Jolimont railway stations as well as the Route 70, Route 75, and Route 48 trams. It is adjacent to Melbourne Park and is part of the Melbourne Sports and Entertainment Precinct. Since it was built in 1853, the MCG has undergone numerous renovations. It served as the centrepiece stadium of the 1956 Summer Olympics, the 2006 Commonwealth Games and 2 Cricket World Cups, 1992 and 2015. Noted for its role in the development of international cricket, the MCG hosted both the first Test match and the first one-day international, played between Australia and England in 1877 and 1971 respectively. It has also maintained strong ties with Australian rules football since its codification in 1859 and has become the principal venue for Australian Football League, AFL matches including the AFL Grand Final, the world's highest attended league championship event. It hosted the Grand Final for the 2022 T20 World Cup. Home to the Australian Sports Museum, the MCG has hosted other major sporting events, including international rules football matches between Australia and Ireland, international rugby union matches, State of Origin, rugby league games, and FIFA World Cup qualifiers. Concerts and other cultural events are also held at the venue with the record attendance standing at 143,750 for a Billy Graham evangelistic crusade in 1959. Grandstand redevelopments and occupational health and safety legislation have limited the maximum seating capacity to approximately 95,000 with an additional 5,000 standing room capacity, bringing the total capacity to 100,024. The MCG is listed on the Victorian Heritage Register and was included on the Australian National Heritage List in 2005. In 2003, journalist Greg Baum called it a shrine, a citadel, a landmark, a totem that symbolises Melbourne to the world. The MCG is built atop a Wurundjeri camping ground and site of numerous corroborees. 11. Founded in November 1838, the Melbourne Cricket Club, MCC, selected the current MCG site in 1853 after previously playing at several grounds around Melbourne. 12. The club's first game was against a military team at the Old Mint site, at the corner of William and La Trobe Streets. Burial Hill, now Flagstaff Gardens, became its home ground in January 1839, but the area was already set aside for botanical gardens and the club was moved on in October 1846 to an area on the south bank of the Yarra about where the Herald and Weekly Times building is today. The area was subject to flooding, forcing the club to move again, this time to a ground in South Melbourne. It was not long before the club was forced out again, this time because of the expansion of the railway. The South Melbourne ground was in the path of Victoria's first steam railway line from Melbourne to Sandridge, now Port Melbourne. Governor La Trobe offered the MCC a choice of 3 sites, an area adjacent to the existing ground, a site at the junction of Flinders and Spring Streets or a 10-acre, about 4 hectares, section of the government paddock at Richmond next to Richmond Park. Between European settlement in 1835 and the early 1860s, this last option, which is now Yarra Park, was known as the government or police paddock and served as a large adjustment area for the horses of the mounted police, border police and native police. The northeastern section also housed the main barracks for the mounted police in the Port Phillip district. In 1850 it was part of a 200-acre, 81 hectares, stretch set aside for public recreation extending from Governor La Trobe's Jolimont estate to the Yarra River. By 1853 it had become a busy promenade for Melbourne residents. An MCC subcommittee chose the Richmond Park option because it was level enough for cricket but sloped enough to prevent inundation. That ground was located where the Richmond, or outer, end of the current MCG is now. At the same time the Richmond Cricket Club was given occupancy rights to 6 acres, 2.4 hectares, for another cricket ground on the eastern side of the government paddock. In 1861, a board of trustees was appointed to be responsible for the ground. Over the first 40 years, most of the trustees were appointed by the MCC, giving the cricket club relative autonomy over the use of the ground. In 1906, the state government's lands ministry appointed 5 new trustees, putting the government-appointed trustees in the majority, and the government has appointed and overseen the trust since. 13. This gives the state government, via the trust, a level of control over the ground's use. At the time of the land grant, the government stipulated that the ground was to be used for cricket and cricket only. This condition technically remained until 1933, when the Melbourne Cricket Ground Act 1933 widened its allowable uses. The 1933 Act has been replaced by separate acts in 1989 and 2009. In 1863, a corridor of land running diagonally across Yarra Park was granted to the Melbourne and Hobsons Bay Railway Company and divided Yarra Park from the river. The mounted police barracks were operational until the 1880s when it was subdivided into the current residential precinct bordered by Vale Street. The area closest to the river was also developed for sporting purposes in later years, including Olympic venues in 1956. The first grandstand at the MCG was the original wooden members stand built in 1854, while the first public grandstand was a 200-metre-long 6,000-seat temporary structure built in 1861. Another grandstand seating 2,000, facing one way to the cricket ground and the other way to the park where football was played, was built in 1876 for the 1877 visit of James Lillywhite's English cricket team. It was during this tour that the MCG hosted the world's first Test match. In 1881, the original members' stand was sold to the Richmond Cricket Club for £55. A new brick stand, considered at the time to be the world's finest cricket facility, was built in its place. The foundation stone was laid by Prince George of Wales and Prince Albert Victor on the 4th of July, and the stand opened in December that year. It was also in 1881 that a telephone was installed at the ground, and the wickets and goal posts were changed from an east-west orientation to north-south. In 1882 a scoreboard was built which showed details of the batsman's name and how he was dismissed. When the Lillywhite Tour stand burned down in 1884, it was replaced by a new stand which seated 450 members and 4,500 public. In 1897, second-story wings were added to the grandstand, as it was known, increasing capacity to 9,000. In 1900 it was lit with electric light. MCG, ca 1914. The 1881 members stand is the smaller building on the left. More stands were built in the early 20th century. An open wooden stand was on the south side of the ground in 1904, and the 2084-seat Gray Smith stand, known as the New Stand until 1912, was erected for members in 1906. The 4,000-seat Harrison stand on the ground's southern side was built in 1908, followed by the 8,000-seat Wardle stand in 1912. In the 15 years after 1897, the grandstand capacity at the ground increased to nearly 20,000, while the full ground capacity was almost 60,000. In 1927, the second brick members stand was replaced at a cost of £60,000. The Harrison and Wardle stands were demolished in 1936 to make way for the southern stand, which was completed in 1937. The southern stand seated 18,200 under cover and 13,000 in the open, and was the main public area of the MCG. The maximum capacity of the ground under this configuration, as advised by the Health Department, was 84,000 seated and 94,000 standing. The northern stand, also known as the Olympic stand, was built to replace the old grandstand for the 1956 Olympic Games. By Health Department regulations, this was to increase the stadium's capacity to 120,000, although this was revised down after the 1956 VFL Grand Final, which could not comfortably accommodate its crowd of 115,802. 10 years later, the Gray Smith stand and the open concrete stand next to it were replaced by the Western stand. The Duke of Edinburgh laid a foundation stone for the Western stand on the 3rd of March 1967, and it was completed in 1968. In 1986, it was renamed the W. H. Ponsford stand in honour of Victorian batsman Bill Ponsford. This was the stadium's highest capacity configuration, and the all-time record crowd for a sporting event at the venue of 121,696 was set under this configuration in the 1970 VFL Grand Final. The MCG was the home of Australia's first full-colour video scoreboard, which replaced the old scoreboard in 1982, located on level 4 of the Western Stand, which notably caught fire in 1999 and was replaced in 2000. A second video screen added in 1994 almost directly opposite, on level 4 of the Olympic Stand. In 1985, light towers were installed at the ground, allowing for night football and day-night cricket games. During the 1980s, the Olympic stand had corporate suites installed, which led to the reduction of seating and standing capacity in the stand. The Ponsford stand had seats installed on the ground level, replacing the standing room, and both the Southern stand and Olympic stand had their wooden bench seats removed and replaced with plastic bucket seats. In 1988, inspections of the old Southern stand found concrete cancer and provided the opportunity to replace the increasingly rundown 50-year-old facility. The projected cost of $100 million was outside what the Melbourne Cricket Club could afford, so the Victorian Football League took the opportunity to part-fund the project in return for a 30-year deal to share the ground. The new Great Southern Stand was completed in 1992, in time for the 1992 Cricket World Cup, at a final cost of $150 million. It was renamed the Shane Warne Stand after Victorian bowler Shane Warne in 2022, shortly after his death. The 1928 Members Stand, the 1956 Olympic Stand and the 1968 W.H. Ponsford Stand were demolished one by one between late 2003 to 2005 and replaced with a new structure in time for the 2006 Commonwealth Games. Despite now standing as a single unbroken stand, the individual sections retain the names of W.H. Ponsford, Olympic and Members Stands. The redevelopment cost exceeded $400 million Australian dollars and pushed the ground's capacity to just above 100,000. Since redevelopment, the highest attendance has been 100,024 at the 2022 AFL Grand Final. From 2011 until 2013, the Victoria State Government and the Melbourne Cricket Club funded a $55 million refurbishment of the facilities in the Great Southern Stand, including renovations to entrance gates and ticket outlets, food and beverage outlets, etc., without significantly modifying the stand. New scoreboards, more than twice the size of the original ones, were installed in the same positions in late 2013. From November 2019 until February 2020, all the playing field lights, including those in the light towers, were replaced with LED sports lighting, with the lighting under the roof and in two of the light towers completed in time for the Boxing Day test against New Zealand. Queen Elizabeth II visited the MCG in 1954 twice for an assembly and display. She attended a Richmond vs Fitzroy match on the 5th of April 1970, 67, and also attended the Commonwealth Games opening ceremony at the ground on the 15th of March 2006. A record for attendance at the grounds was set by religious leader Billy Graham, whose event in 1959 was attended by at least 143,000 people. The first rock concert to be held at the ground was one by David Cassidy in 1974. In 1978, David Bowie held a concert there. In 1993, Paul McCartney, U2 and Madonna held 3 concerts, with the highest attendances for a music concert at MCG, with 147,241 tickets sold. The Rolling Stones held concerts in 1995, Michael Jackson in 1996, the Three Tenors in 1997, Elton John and Billy Joel in 1998. Pope John Paul II held a service at the MCG on the 27th of November 1986, and a celebration there of the Polish community the next day. The MCG hosted the Police with special guests Fergie and Fiction playing on Australia Day 2008, the first MCG concert in 10 years. The MCG hosted Sound Relief, a concert donating all revenues to the Red Cross Victorian Bushfire Appeal, with performances from Kings of Leon, Midnight Oil, Split Enz, Paul Kelly, Hunters and Collectors, Wolfmother, Jet and Bliss NSO, among others. It was held on the 14th of March 2009. On the 5th of November 2010, the MCG hosted the starting line and opening challenge for the Amazing Race Australia 1. This episode aired on the 16th of May 2011. Sporting records. First ever Test cricket match, Australia v England, 1877. First ever one-day international cricket match, 1971. Highest first-class cricket score, 1107, Victoria v New South Wales, 1926. Australia's first international lacrosse match, Australia v Canada, 1907, 30,000. Fastest ball bowled in a cricket match in Australia, third fastest in the world, 160.7 km per hour, Sean Tate, Australia v Pakistan, the 5th of February 2010. Stadium records. World's first all-colour cricket scoreboard with instant replays. World's first electronic sight screens. World's first Super Sopper. World's first scrolling signage at an oval-shaped ground. First time an international cricket match was played on a one-piece portable pitch, Boxing Day Test, 2000. World's tallest floodlights.